Welcome back to this After Effects training course. In this lesson, we will discuss how to optimize After Effects. Okay, let's get started. Let's go up to After Effects CC, let's go to Preferences, click on General. Now this is our Preferences panel. This is very similar to what you'd see in other programs. It has specific options that you can change to customize it to how you want to use the program. So the first thing we're going to do is go into Previews, and we're going to set it at about 1/4 or 1/8 depending on your computer. I am using a 2.8 gigahertz 8-core Mac Pro with 26 gigs of RAM and a 1 gig graphics card. So for me, these settings work. So I set it at 1/8, and my GPU information is set to 700 megabytes. Now typically what you want to do is set your texture memory to about 70% of what your graphics card memory total is. So mine is 1 gigabyte, so I set it to 700 megabytes. That's 70% of my 1 gigabyte graphics card. Okay, now let's go over to Media and Disk Cache. Now we want to make sure that that is enabled. We should set it to a hard drive that has at least 100 to 200 gigabytes free on it. And I normally set this to about 100. You can set it to more if you have a larger hard drive, but 100 seems to work fine. Over the years working as a visual effects supervisor, I've noticed a lot of people do not empty the disk cache, or they don't clean the database of cache on their system. The result of this can be hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes taking up space on your hard drive. These are temporary files, and After Effects will create new temporary files when you open it up again. So if you are constantly creating After Effects files, I would recommend that every month or two you go into the preferences and empty the disk cache. For me it's 2.1 gigs, so I will wipe that and clean database. The next thing we're going to do is go into the autosave panel. We'll make sure it's checked and turned on. We'll make sure it's set to save every 5 minutes and that it saves up to 40 versions. I highly recommend you set it up like this because this is a huge time saver, because in After Effects you tend to click a lot every minute. So you might even want to set it to quicker than 5 minutes and more than 40, but at least keep this as the minimum. What that means is you'll be able to go back to previous save points up to 200 minutes. The next area we want to check out is memory. I have 26 gigs of RAM installed in this system, and I've set it up so there's 5 gigabytes reserved for other applications. What that means is I have 21 gigabytes being used for all of the Adobe applications. 5 gigabytes will be used for things like going on the internet, for example. Alright, so that is how you optimize your After Effects to make sure you're auto-saving properly, to make sure you're using your installed RAM and graphics card properly, and also to make sure you're not using up too much space through system cache files. Alright guys, welcome to this After Effects training course. This lesson will be focused on creating compositions. Okay, so let's go up to our composition window inside After Effects. Let's go to New Composition, and let's create a few presets. So right now, we will delete the custom one. Okay, so what we can do is go to one of the Adobe presets. We'll click on HDTV 1080-24, and we will make sure it says 1920 by 1080, which it does. We will make sure that it has square pixels. That means that each pixel is as high as it is wide. Okay, the next thing is the frame rate. We want to make sure it says 23.976 or 29.97 or whatever your footage was shot at. So for me, I normally shoot at 23.976, so we'll go with that. The duration is 10 seconds. We can change that later if we wish. So let's create a preset by clicking here. We will name the preset 1920 times 1080 to 3.976. Okay, so now when we click on the preset, it'll be at the bottom here. That's if we're shooting in high definition at 23.98. Now let's make a 4K preset, so we'll go to 3840, and because we've checked this box, it'll stay at 16:9, which is widescreen, which is what we want, which is equivalent to 1920 by 1080. So 3840 by 2160 is a 4K resolution at 16:9 ratio. This is also known as UHD or Ultra HD. Pixel aspect ratio is square pixels, and again 23.976 is what we want. Duration 10 seconds, that's fine. So we will save this. 3840 times 2160 at 23.976. Okay, so if we go here, we can see both of those now. If you're ever working with 720p footage, it's very simple, the same thing. It's a 16:9 ratio. So width 1280 by 720. Square pixels, everything's the same, 23, that's fine. We'll go into the preset here. We'll call it 1280 times 720, and we'll call it 23.976 again. Okay, now we have 3 presets. And if we were working in standard definition, we would uncheck this because typically standard definition is not widescreen. So we would change the width to 640, the height to 480. We would get a ratio of 4:3. Square pixels will stay the same. Frame rate can be 23.976 or 29.97. And we will save that. We will call it 640 by 480 at 23.976 and press OK. Okay, so those are your typical resolutions and how to create them. Alright guys, welcome back to this After Effects training course. In this lesson we will be discussing how to export your project. So first off, we need something to export, so let's go to Layer, Solid. We'll create a blue layer, and for now it's 10 seconds, that's all we need to do in order for it to export. So what we can do is click that. We can go to Composition, we can go to Add to Render Queue. In the bottom here, it has switched over to our Render Queue panel. This is where we export everything in After Effects. Here's the Comp 1 that we exported that has the blue frame. If you'd like to create a standard definition export, then what you do is have your composition set up with your images that you'd like to export. You go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. Under the Output module, we go to Make Template. We call this SD for Standard Definition Export. We can click on Edit. We go over to Format Options, Video Codec, and change that to H.264. And because this is standard definition, we do not need it to be very high. So if this were HD, we'd set it around 25 to 30,000. If this was 4K, it'd be even higher than that. But because this is standard definition, we don't need it set too high. So 8,000 will be fine for our purposes. Click OK. Now this is a 4K composition that we've created, so in order to make it standard definition, we need to change a few things. So we've already changed the bitrate to 8,000 kilobits per second. So the next thing we need to do is constrain the resolution to standard definition. So down here with the 16:9 checkbox selected for the aspect ratio, we can change the lower number to 480. And because of the aspect ratio being 16:9, a 480 composition will have the width of pixels being 853, which means it is standard definition widescreen. Okay, so we don't need crop and we can turn off the audio. Let's click on OK, go to OK, and we can see that our standard definition export preset has been selected. The next thing to do is go to Output, click it, navigate to where you'd like the export to go, navigate to where you'd like your export to go, give it a name. For this one we'll call it SD export. Click on Save and go to Render. In the Output module, we will click on the arrow here and you'll see a bunch of presets that are already set up. These ones I created, so what we'll do is I'll show you how to actually create these. Let's go to Make Template. This panel will come up. Okay, so this is where we give it a name. We'll call it 1080p. We'll go into Edit. Format QuickTime is fine. Video output, channels RGB, that is all fine. Format options. We'll change our video codec to H.264 because it's a pretty decent compression compared to Apple ProRes, but you may need Apple ProRes if you are exporting and need something that's lossless. For now we will use H.264. We will limit our data rate 30,000 kilobits per second. Now if you're working with a resolution of 4K, then you could go with 35,000 for example. If you're working with standard definition, you may only need this to be 8,000 for example. So we're working with 1920 by 1080, so we will keep it at 30,000. We'll click OK. To be safe, we will always resize it to 1920 by 1080. Custom and resize quality high. We do not want it to crop, so we'll keep that unchecked. And we do not need audio, so we'll turn it off. We'll go to OK, and then OK. Now, if we click the arrow, we will see our new preset created. Okay, so the next thing is, if you need, for example, a lower thirds title where the background needs to be transparent, because you're going to be putting it over footage inside another editing program, you're going to want an alpha channel. The way we do that is we click on Output module, we go to Make Template, we call it 1080p alpha so that we know that this preset is the alpha channel preset. We click on Edit, and we cannot use H.264 because it does not support alpha channels. So instead what we'll do is we'll choose the animation, or we can go to ProRes, but I typically use animation. We'll go to OK, then we will go to channels and we will choose RGB plus alpha. The RGB means the red, greens, and blues of your image, basically your lower thirds title, for example, and the plus alpha means it'll export an alpha channel, meaning a transparent background. If your After Effects project does include a transparent background, but you choose this, After Effects will not export a transparent background. Instead, it'll render out a black background and it's basically useless. So make sure that if you need a transparent background, you change it to animation or another codec that supports RGB plus alpha. The next thing is we want to make sure that resize is selected so that our preset is always 1080. We want no crop and the audio is off. So we go to OK. We call it 1080p alpha and we click OK. To create a 4K preset or to render out your file in 4K, the first thing you want to do is make sure your file and your composition was created in 4K. So for this example, we will go to Composition, Settings, and this is currently set to 1920 by 1080. So we can switch this to 3840 by 2160. We can click OK. Now we have a 4K composition. We will click on our photo. We will press S to bring up the scale property, and we can scale it up to 4K. Now this is a pretty large photo, so we won't lose any quality. If you're working with 1080 footage, I would recommend exporting at 1080. Okay, so now that we have our 4K composition and our image scaled up to 4K, we can then go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. Now the file has been sent to our Render Queue section. Under the bottom tab here, we can go to Make Template. A window pops up and we can enter in our preset name here. So for this one, we will call it 4K Export, for example. We can click on Edit. Now we go into Format Options. Another window pops up. We can go to Video Codec and go down to H.264. We can limit the data rate. Because this is a 4K file, we would like to set this a little higher than we did in our 1080p preset. So we'll set it to 35,000. Now you can go higher than this if you'd like, but 35,000 seems to be a good bit rate for 4K footage. Click on OK. Make sure RGB is selected. We can make sure that it is exporting at 4K, so we will resize this and make sure it says 3840 by 2160. Okay, so now that we've resized this to 4K, we can go to the next section. We do not need the crop and we do not need audio. Let's turn that off and hit OK. Now we go to OK. At the bottom here, you will see that our 4K export preset has been created. The next thing we do is in the Output section, we click it, and we would navigate to our finals folder or wherever you'd like the export to go. You'd give it a name and then hit Save. For this one, we'll call it 4K Export. We'll click Save, and then we will render. It will take a lot longer than your HD footage because it is 4 times the size and resolution, so just be patient with the export.